Okay.
Wow. You're so perfect. You're so cute. You remind me so much of my friend Natasha and John's dog, Ruka. Also a red heeler. Wow, that was a song.
That was a song. All right. Switching to camera. It looks great. All right. We are live, I think. Let me know in the chat, folks, if audio is... Oh, I didn't turn the audio on. Audio. Okay. Okay, we're live. Let me know if the audio is good. The video...
It was lagging a little bit when I was just on it.
Yeah, I think so. Hello. And if someone can just donate like a $500 super chat just to make sure the super chats are working. Okay. All right. Cool. I think that we're working.
Nice catch.
Okay. So, hello. Per usual, this is the Radical Reviewer, but today I am joined by John Worm.
Hello.
Oh, hang on. Oh. Where's
You got an arrow
where's
horn?
the thing?
I got one if you can't get there.
All right, awesome. So, John, is it John or Mr. Worm?
Oh, Mr. Worm is my father.
Okay. All right. You play in a few different bands, I think. So I know you from Rent Strike.
Yes.
But I think I saw on your Twitter that you were playing with Days and Days on their tour. Like, who all are you playing with?
I wasn't playing with them. I played with them. Last night they had a show in Seattle that was with AJJ and the Bridge City Sinners and Amigo the Devil, and I stood in on banjo for like 5 songs or 4 songs.
That counts.
Yeah, I think so. I was on tour. The reason I am in Cascadia right now is I was on tour with Chad Hates George, which is Jesse from Days and Days, and Marissa, his sister's side project. So I was playing banjo for them.
Nice.
Yeah.
I think that I thought that I'd first discovered you from a compilation disc. But after doing some digging, because I was trying to find like what compilation CD was that from, I think that I actually discovered you from Artichokeification.
Yeah, sure.
Which was like an old like before
Dude ended up being a piece of shit.
Before Fistful of Vinyl and before Punks with the Camera. Apparently, the Artichokeification person is a bad person.
Bad person, yeah.
Yeah, like they weren't paying people; they were like shitty in multiple other ways.
Yeah, there was allegations of assault.
Yeah, so that's
well substantiated allegations of assault.
That's too bad because they had like a bunch of stuff.
That's how I would before we had Spotify and stuff, which for better or worse has changed how we consume music. I used to just go on their YouTube channel and watch all of their videos in a row when I was first getting into folk punk.
So a funny background thing, which I'm sure you're aware of, but the first song I had of yours was they uploaded Nothing Song, Nowhere Song and Insert Town, Insert State like on top of each other.
Oh, really?
And so I downloaded that song and I liked it, but I had to go and like cut it in half. So it was like Insert Town, Insert State with like another song quietly in the background and then like half of the other song.
That's
extremely
strange.
And that was how I had your music initially back in the day.
How did they even make that work? How do you fuck up like that?
I don't know.
Can I curse on here? Is that fine?
Yeah, fuck it's fine.
Are we in God's country? Is the internet God's country?
So longtime viewers of the show might recognize that you have actually been featured on this channel a couple times now. The first time was I did a list of best political folk punk songs, and you placed at number 7.
Whoa.
You beat Andrew Jackson Jihad and Homeless Gospel Choir.
That's the only time that'll ever happen.
So that's like pretty good accolades, I think.
So?
if you ask me. I noticed that you don't have that on your Facebook or your Bandcamp or anywhere.
What?
That
I received that accolade. I wasn't aware of it until now. I'll tell my manager to put it on right now.
I wanted to. There was no time, but I wanted to do a full. Who's the Canadian guy that does like band interviews? Nardwar. Nardwar. No.
Maybe.
Oh, he's fascinating. He brings gifts, and I wanted to have a
trophy,
a little trophy
a
that said like
participation
seventh
trophy.
place. Unfortunately, that could not be achieved.
It's a trophy in spirit, you know.
Yeah. Anyway, so that's my first. And then you also your song "They Live" was at the end of the review for something.
You have a recording of it?
Yeah.
Really?
I have my ways. Don't worry about it.
Did I send it to you?
All right. What else? This says loading. Hopefully we're live, right?
Bork.
I'm pretty sure we're live. I'm gonna double check.
Yeah. Double check.
Did we just do all this for nothing? It says live. Okay. Yeah. We're good. Okay. On to the questions. So, if you could obligate Donald Trump, to engage in any piece of media, read a book, watch a movie, documentary, listen to an album, play a video game, any kind of media, engage in it, what would it be and why?
That's a hard question because it's hard to go off that premise because this is a man. He doesn't like dogs and stuff. You know, it's hard to tell. Like, you can lead a horse to water. You know what I mean? But like, how are you gonna make him engage with something? He's so morally bankrupt, and so how would you even relate to that? One piece of media. I don't know. What would your answer be? Can I ask that? Can I flip this around? Perhaps need a little frame of reference or like inspiration to answer this question.
Yeah, so I've heard this answered in two different ways, and one of the ways was, what if he's not going to learn anything? What's like the most painful? So like, 20 hours of the same song over and over or something. I've heard that response, and I've also heard what's like the most accessible. Like there's a YouTuber, ContraPoints, who has like 2 videos explaining like why capitalism sucks. It's like really accessible.
Sure.
Those are like 2 types of answers I've received.
I guess I wonder if Donald Trump or any of his ilk have ever like encountered or engaged with like anti-capitalist propaganda, or like if that's just something they've totally shut out of their lives. So that's interesting. As far as I like the idea of him suffering. Certainly, something that I think many of us have thought about. So my mind is tends towards the first option of maybe a 20-hour long playlist of harsh noise or something.
Yeah.
I don't know. What about how about V for Vendetta? That guy. That guy, I think that Trump would really realize that what he's gone down the wrong path if he just, watched V for
Vendetta. What's that? Alan Moore, right? He's like an anarchist. Yeah.
Is he?
Yeah.
I just saw he went public about the fact that he voted for Labor in the catastrophic election a few weeks ago.
We don't talk about that in this house.
Yeah. I was surprised. I was like, Alan Moore, really? You're gonna go public about this one? It's weird. But I guess, it's an important election that unfortunately did not end up turning out very well.
All right, but cool. So, one question down, 4 pages left. No.
Sure.
Okay, 20 hours of harsh noise. Do you know the band Bucket of Piss?
No.
They're like a noise. It's like he takes one of those metal like that what they would use to serve food in at a buffet, and he has like an amp hooked up to it, and he just like smacks a drumstick on it. And,
Okay.
oh man, it's just noise. It's great. Maybe something like that. All right. Is there a genre or artist that folks might not expect you to like? How did you discover them? What do you like about them? Tell us about it.
Well, I really like Cake. Is maybe one of my favorite bands. Cake is good. Cake is not as explicitly political or as explicitly kind of like punk rock as some of the things that I draw direct influence from, but Cake is pretty punk rock. Their lyrics are really good. They, he writes about the the end of humanity a lot, and the human experience in a very broad way. Which is something I'm fascinated by his perspective.
All right. Cool. Okay. Are you familiar with the show Drunk History?
Yeah, kind of in a cursory way.
Okay. So I've always thought there should be like a punk history.
Okay.
So like there's a lot of cool stories in the punk scene. There's
Sure.
Joe Biafra ran for mayor.
Sure.
MDC like wrote a song about how they were on tour with the Big Boys and Bad Brains, and the Bad Brains found out the lead singer of Big Boys was gay, and they like refused to pay him, and they like wrote a song about it. There's like interesting stories to tell, right?
Sure.
I think it was like the Johnny Hobo, or maybe it was like the Wingnut tracks about like making merch and like going on trains in foreign countries. They had like spliced in to an album. The question is, what's a story, like an experience you've had touring that like could basically be like a punk history, like a wacky or sad or intense or like.
So like about my ex specific, I do have something that relates to what comes to mind. This isn't an experience that I had touring, but in the town that I grew up in Michigan, do you know that the band from the 80s, kind of like they're definitely a punk band, very political. They're called the Crucifix.
Yes,
Okay.
I know of their existence.
They got this one song, Hinckley Had a Vision. That's like their most popular song. Anyway, great song. Great band. They only did like one album maybe. But so the guy Doc Dart, who sang in that band, there's weird lore about this guy. He is the black sheep of the family. I don't know if you've ever looked at the bottom of a styrofoam cup, but a lot of them have Dart on the bottom. Dart is like this huge conglomeration company.
Like M3 or something,
Yeah,
basically?
yeah. So the Dart family, who owns this, giant, styrofoam cup concern or whatever, they have this huge mansion in my hometown, and Doc Dart is the black sheep of this family. He sang in the Crucifix and was basically disowned by this family, and has led a very, very simultaneously reclusive but also public life. He had a house in the neighborhood that I grew up in, and people would come by because he had like a big facade, like a blue board facade in front of his house, and he would put big block letters with like support the ALF or like we deserved 9/11, like right after 9/11 happened. And so oh my god, I remember my parents driving by there and being like, what the fuck? And so he was always he lived on Dobie Road was the name of the street. He was always the crazy guy who lived on Dobie to us and the neighborhood kids. So my personal connection to the lore is we for our middle school did like this annual like 5K walk run that all the students were kind of required to do, and his house was right on on this loop, and so he stood out one year and gave people water. And because he had this reputation, the next year the principal of the school was like outside, like kind of like his house, like making sure he wasn't doing that. But the closest I ever got to him personally was I was in this QD, which is like a little convenience liquor store that has like some groceries, and I seen him in there, and he was buying all these bananas, and I was like, oh my god, you're Doc Dart, like, why? He's like, hi, and I was like, why are you buying all those bananas? He had like armfuls of bananas, and he was like, I feed the raccoons that are in my backyard. That's my and that's my Doc Dart story. That's my punk lore.
All right. Fuck yeah, sounds good. Okay. The YouTuber. This is like kind of this one is like a tiered one. So okay, the YouTuber CGP Grey did a video on automation.
Okay.
In which they argued that mechanical muscles have put manufacturing people out of jobs.
Okay.
And that manufacturing minds will push people out of work in general.
Sure.
And in that video, they argue that we cannot live in a poem and painting-based economy because artistic media requires an audience. And so, by its nature, it will always be a small portion of the population. Okay, so let's put a pin in that part. Right?
Okay.
Okay. Now, on the Rent Strike Facebook page, there was a recent post that says, people have been sharing their music streaming top 10 list or whatever. And on the Rent Strike Facebook page, there was a post that says, folks are putting up their music streaming service year-end summaries. And those numbers can be taken to represent how relatively little we as artists are compensated for our efforts, and how data-driven the pursuit of art becomes under capitalism. Good point. They can also contain the opportunity for reflection on the music you have connected with and found meaningful. Okay, so I'm thinking about these two things, right? And then you go on to encourage people to support their favorite artists as directly as possible.
Yeah.
Right? Okay.
Sure.
So it's not really a question. It's more like a lot of people I know create content. Like they do podcasts, they have YouTube channels, they do Twitter or something. Or sometimes there's a lot of like these new art forms like performing music live. It's like something people have started doing.
Yeah, weird.
Yeah.
I wouldn't know anything about that.
Anyway, so there's like this gig economy where people are like taking a bunch of like side jobs, like for Uber or Lyft or something to make ends meet, and yet like there's more people that are artists now. So, like, what's the future of this look like? Is it easier to become an artist now that like you can upload stuff online where anyone can access it all over the world? Is it it's harder because people expect music to be like free, and so you get kind of no returns. Automation making it so it's like people are working like multiple jobs. Like, what is the future of being an artist?
I guess I would draw a distinction first and foremost, kind of like between the ease of being an artist and the ease of having your art be accessible and consumable.
Okay.
I don't think it's any easier now to be an artist than it was 50, 100, 1,000 years ago. I think that art is like a very human thing to do, and a lot of people engage in art and like their own personal ways, and I think that the what technology has granted us is a larger platform and more ease of access to share your art and to experience other people's art. As far as the future goes, I get a little kind of wrapped up in thinking about like how independent distribution of music. I'm a musician, so of course I'm thinking about music and the music industry and my slice of it and what I have experienced. The growing dependence on streaming platforms that are like, no one owns their music anymore, right? No one. The way things are going now, and seemingly no one is buying records anymore, right? I mean, I think like albums have been on the decline for a long time. People are streaming more, which yeah, it's more accessible, but it takes away from the part ownership that I think is important to a lot of people in how they experience art. Uh, I think it turns art into, maybe this is me shaking my fist at the clouds a little bit, but it to me it takes something of the personal investment and personal stake in art away from the whole thing. So what we end up with is like this paradigm where people are consuming more art than ever, presumably, but it's almost it's made impersonal, and it's made data driven. It's this the person listening to this album becomes another number that you can look at a year-end summary of, and they're just another decimal place. And it's hard for me to square that with the initial reason, at least in my view, of art, which is to express yourself and to foster some sort of personal connection with someone else, and to commiserate and to not feel so alone. And it's I don't know, the future. I think it's impossible to predict what the future is going to look like for music and for art consumption. I think that things are changing so much and technology is changing so much. It's really hard to pin down. But I think that no matter what, there's still going to be people who want to experience and connect with art in a way that necessitates some sort of personal investment beyond streaming on a platform. I think that there will always be room for people who are making honest art, and the distribution might look like some unpredictable models, but life finds a way.
Fair enough.
That was maybe very long-winded.
No, that's great. Yeah, I'm thinking about, like, I'm picturing, and it's probably just a not logical representation of how it happened, but I'm picturing, like, in the 60s, like the band saying, like, oh, it's about the music and caring about the music, and like the record exec people are like, no, it's about the numbers, look at these charts. And then for some fucking reason the charts won.
Well, the charts always win, and the market works its magic and reduces things to the consumable, and that's how we have great human progress.
So this is separated. This is like off script, but this is kind of like a thing that what you're saying is making me think of. Is do you ever, like, you put something on YouTube, like let's say you put on like She Her Hers on YouTube.
Great band, by the way. Check them out. New EP came out like 2 months ago.
Ooh.
Don Giovanni Records.
So you put that on, and then like a couple songs later, Days and Days comes on, and then a couple songs later, Against Me comes on, and then a couple songs later, Mumford and Sons comes on.
Sure.
You know what I mean? Like it always like leads towards like it. I'm like, I'm in the mood for unknown stuff.
Yeah.
And then because of algorithms, it's like playing more and more known stuff till eventually it's playing like whatever, I don't know, Bob Dylan or something. Like, Bob Dylan's cool. It's not what I came here for.
Well, it's kind of, I mean, that is kind of, you're right. I think it's built into these platforms that are designed, however they may be used by independent artists, the intention behind these structures, whether that's YouTube or Spotify or whatever, the purpose behind them is to reinforce the spectacle or something. Like, I mean, it's to take these artists that have been deemed profitable, that have been deemed like in line with a certain worldview that wants to get pushed by these corporate interests, and it pushes you towards those avenues, and I think that that's like unavoidable, and I think that it makes, it's like I was saying, I think it makes me really kind of mourn these independent distribution networks that were built in the 90s and early 2000s and have since been somewhat abandoned. Like, I mean, look at, like, I guess MySpace music maybe isn't the best example, but because it is still, at the end of the day, it's MySpace and it was curated by some large company, but it's hard for me to square, like, at least my memories of MySpace music, being able to like find underground artists in kind of an easier way than like Spotify is so up and in your face about like listen to Drake. That's what Spotify wants you to do, is listen to Drake.
Yeah, for sure.
And I think it's a good tool, and I think it's like a really, I'm able to get some royalties from them for streaming. I'm able to get my art to countries of the world that I would never be able to fucking it beats the hell out of selling cassette tapes out of the trunk of your car, I suppose. But it makes me wonder what game we're playing, or like what kind of this end result of a constant leaning towards the cheapening and selling out of a message and a platform is, if that makes any sense.
Yeah. All right, moving along. I used to work at this thrift store, and after hours, you were allowed to listen to music while we cleaned up the store for the next day.
Okay.
And I was playing your song, Directile Dysfunction,
Sure.
and a coworker said that you sounded like you'd been kicked in the balls.
Okay.
Do you feel like that's a fair characterization?
Capitalism kicks us all in the metaphorical balls.
Fair enough. Okay. Robert Anton Wilson argued that presidents like activate the public in opposition to them. Like Nixon made people worry about the environment, and so like the Endangered Species Act was passed,
Sure.
and like Reagan was super religious, and so like people who were like cautious about the separation of church and state were like activated by that.
Sure.
And I think that that's really true. And what that caused me to think is like, okay, we have Bush and 9/11. And all this, like, emo music is popular. Simple Plan, Good Charlotte, My Chemical Romance, all that stuff is popular, like, during this time, right? It almost seems like a reflection of that. And during the Obama years, this, like, return to hope and stuff, you have Mumford & Sons and Head in the Heart, like, all this kind of folksy music becomes popular again. With that in mind, what do you think is like the future of popular music, like as reflected by a Trump presidency?
Well, who are the big ones now? Like, I think about like Billie Eilish or like Lil Nas X is like really popular, like new, in that they don't feel as derivative as some of the stuff on the radio. It feels as though those two artists specifically, I suppose, have a pretty fresh take on what pop music is. The thread that seems to stick out in my mind is kind of and this is maybe the same thing if you spend any time on Twitter. It's the same. It's the sense of humor that gets propagated and is popular on Twitter, but it's just this ironic detachment of nothing is taken at face value, kind of, and things are. It's almost like a sardonic kind of like like an ironic detachment from the art itself and from society, which maybe is a defense mechanism against the absolute absurdity of the times that we live in. I mean, I don't know. It's hard to picture like you hear a protest, like a punk song. It's like a protest, like fuck Trump. It's just like, what are you saying? Like, of course, fuck Trump. But like, maybe the future is I guess pop music is always going to like I was saying, like uphold these values that want to get pushed. By power structures and social structures. Maybe it looks like approaching social issues with an ironic detachment, kind of limited self-investment or something that keeps you from getting your heart broken, I guess, every single day. I guess that's the trend that I've noticed.
Okay, let me see if if we're on the same page. So I watch a lot of Todd in the Shadows is like a popular music reviewer on YouTube.
Okay.
The Rap Critic is like a music reviewer on YouTube.
Okay.
Like I don't listen to popular music much, but I am fascinated by what's going on in the mainstream.
Sure.
And one of the songs they were looking at was is a mumble rap song, and it's like, oh, the things they are saying are exciting. And if this was like the early 2000s, like Usher club music stuff, they'd be like really belting it.
Yeah.
But they kind of just like say it like it's nothing. Like,
sure,
and there is, my understanding is there's a little bit of like a emotional, like The Weeknd, I think, has like emotional songs, like a I'm agreeing with this detached, like even stuff that's like really impactful is like said like in an empty way.
Well, I think that expressing emotion in an honest way opens yourself to criticism and to heartbreak it's a very vulnerable thing, and to approach it with this, maybe you are talking about some pretty intense stuff, but to approach it, it's a defense mechanism. I think it's like putting yourself kind of beyond the sphere of criticism, because maybe you were just kind of joking or something, or like your heart's not in it, you can't get hurt. And I think that we live in a society
oh shit,
that hurts and is painful, and it's hard to live in. And I think that certainly, you look at some of the humor and some of the kind of like tending towards absurdism that like some of the like Zoomer humor has, and like Zoomer Twitter, like you see these young people just like eating Tide Pods and stuff, but it's this like ironic detachment. Haha, I don't give a shit about life, because like how can you afford to give a shit about life? Like, this is a profoundly disheartening world that we inhabit sometimes. And I think certainly that Trump, if we're gonna mark things, historical periods, by our presidencies, as we often do, I think that the Trump era is one of profound disheartenment.
Okay. Next question. What is the role of music in creating social change?
Wow, I struggle with that so much. I probably have an existential crisis about what the fuck I'm doing with my life, like, once every 6 months-ish. It's hard to square the world being on fire with my seemingly frivolous playing of musical instruments and like singing about Lord of the Rings. But on my good days, I think I view music as like a really potentially powerful tool for social change. On my good days, I think that I think ultimately it comes down to our actions have ripples in unimaginable ways, and by building this platform that musicians do to spread their messaging, and then spreading it no matter how trivial the act of singing about how something is fucked up, no matter how trivial the act of just singing about it instead of quote unquote doing something about it can be seen, I think those actions end up having a lot of unintended effects, and it's really hard for people to see all ends. And so some days I feel good about what I do. Other days I think I should probably hang up my banjo and go volunteer at the border or something. I mean, I don't know. Christ, go sit in a tree somewhere.
Fair enough. Cool. So, like many angsty teens back in high school, I read the Heroin Diaries, that
The
Nikki
Nikki
Sixx
Sixx
book.
Huh? This is so weird. I was just talking about this book yesterday.
Really?
Why did that come up?
So okay, so it was like at Hot Topic.
Oh, that dude is so cringy.
Oh, he shoots heroin into his dick.
Wow.
Oh, it's so edgy.
Never done that before.
Oh man, it's so of its time. You know, when you flip
definitely.
through it, it's very much
I
like
heard of that, but maybe like 2004 or something.
I don't. Anyway, okay, but
Who was president?
yeah, who was president? So in that book, he talks a lot about how a lot of his songs have like deep literary meanings or like references.
Okay.
And he's frustrated because everyone wants to hear about girls, and like how much are you partying and like how many people you slept with or something. It caused me to think a lot about like the disconnect between what is appreciated about an artist versus like things that someone puts into their art that goes unnoticed.
Sure.
So I wondered, like, is there maybe something in your music or a song that you think is like going unnoticed, like something like a person might not catch up on?
Well, I'm a big proponent of like art, the accessibility of art being, and something I've kind of strived to did for in my songwriting is to try and write about specific things that I've experienced or I think about and try and frame them kind of in a way that is maybe more universal. So I have this, Lord of the Rings concept album that a lot of people listen to and don't realize is a Lord of the Rings concept album. And it was written in a very intentional way in that way where I didn't want someone to have to know about Lord of the Rings or even give a shit about Lord of the Rings to like enjoy and listen to this music. So I guess it's not necessarily that there's any aspect that's like going unappreciated or unnoticed, but I think that it's like
I didn't notice, but I don't know Lord of the Rings very well.
Right, and that's fine. That's what's your loss, but that's fine. And I think that it's using it's almost trying to take like my own thoughts and find my own thoughts and stories and try to find the archetypes that support and fit them, and then use that to tell a story that makes sense to more than just me. So it's almost like I hope that there's a lot of stuff that goes unnoticed and unappreciated in the art that I make. I don't necessarily want to write music that is taken at face value. In a perfect world, people are listening to it and connecting with it and writing their own story from it, I suppose.
I like that. It reminds me of like Jello Biafra talked about the reason he would never want to make a music video is because like the music video is supposed to be in your mind. That he didn't like forcing a visual representation of it, which like I like music videos, but I do understand like the concept, like that makes sense. That wanting the interpretation of the song to be for the individual.
Yeah, that makes sense to me.
Awesome. Amazing. All right, your latest album has a lot of tempo changes and slow melodic stuff, and it kind of reminded me of like Cole or by Blackbird Rum or Germinal, like some of their slower stuff. But it also really reminded me of like doom metal, like that the band Sleep, who did that song from Gummo when the kids are biking and dun dun dun. Okay.
One of my favorite bands. I've seen them like 4 times live.
Oh shit! Really?
Yeah.
I had to look up who that was because I only know them from that part in Gummo.
Sure.
But I do like I love that part. Okay. So where am I in the questions? Tempo, yada yada yada. Okay. What would you say have been some of your greatest influences whether it's bands or books, movies, pictures, food, whatever. Like, what kind of things have been like
Food.
influential for your craft?
Okay. Well, so that I mean, this last album that you're talking about, 9, is, like I said, a Lord of the Rings concept album. So of course it's impossible to talk about that album without talking about Tolkien, who's again, I think it comes down to archetypes, and like I think I've always had kind of a fascination with like storytelling and the kind of broader human truth that is explored in stories, whether that's folk tales or Tolkien, I guess in his case, his attempt to write a folk tale for England. I think that there's some really powerful truths that are held in archetypes, and that's why they've endured throughout human history. I think the classic struggle of good versus evil is something that I find. Obviously real life is always far more nuanced than that, but I think that there's something, especially in struggles that 9 was written about Lord of the Rings, yes, but also about my experience with heroin and my struggle in kind of coming to grips with the fact that I could no longer use heroin or I'd probably die. And then having to, leave it behind, something that destroyed, my life and sanity in so many ways, but also pulled me and kept me alive, kind of kicking and screaming for a couple of years. So it's easy to kind of look at the struggle there as being very black and white, good and evil. And I think that a lot of the themes in Lord of the Rings are obviously black and white, good and evil. There is no moral subjectivity in Lord of the Rings. It is all Sauron is bad because he has a big black tower and he has these little goons who are monsters or whatever fighting for him. And obviously real life is more complicated than that, but it's nice to fall back on these archetypes. There's a comfort in them, and a purity kind of that I think in its best forms art can flatten reality into a simple yet profound kind of version of itself. And that's kind of what I tried to do with 9. More recently though, I've been reading a fair amount of work by the Situationists, Guy Debord and Raoul Vaneguin, and their kind of statements on
You did say spectacle earlier.
Yeah. Well, I've been hanging out with Josh Kirby a lot too. If you know Josh Kirby from Facebook, there's maybe those are less archetypal and stark works, but there's still something that I think that the Situationists tried to describe the human condition within a post-Marxist framework, but still did a good job of kind of delving into these base truths of where we find ourselves now. I guess all that is to say that life is frightfully complicated, and a lot of my inspiration comes from ways of explaining life that are maybe not simpler, but make a little bit more sense than quote unquote the real world tends to. And I try and incorporate that a lot in my art.
Okay, dope. I'm thinking because there's so much talk now. I feel like I've heard for a long time that the Harry Potter author person is a shitty person.
Sure.
But there's a lot of talk recently. I guess she's been shitty recently. So yeah. I'm thinking, Tolkien, the one person who hasn't been a famous fantasy author that's totally a shitty person.
Well, I don't know. There's a lot to be read into those books. I mean, I think you can read anything into them, but there's a lot.
He said like I hate allegories. The Lord of the Rings is not an allegory for World War II.
Yeah, I think that quote. I hear that quote pretty frequently. I think there's something. It's like taken out of context in a weird way or something. I think that he wouldn't. I think there's a specific kind of allegory that he's talking about in that quote, and I think that it's this potted plant in the windowsill represents the family's hope for moving out, like in fucking Raisin in the Sun or whatever. I think that's maybe more in line with the allegory that
like the video essayist, like hyper.
Yeah, like this means this and that means that kind of thing. I think that allegory, it's it's all archetypes, right? It's all. I mean, you're following archetypes and like that. It's almost a form of allegory, right? It's telling the same story in a different way, and that's derivative, sure. Sometimes, but I think a lot of great art I think all art is informed by art that came before it. All human actions are informed by the actions of our ancestors, and I'm sorry, what was the question?
Okay. Is there hope for a better world? It seems like every generation has this moment where it's like, this is it. Like, shit's gonna hit the fan. Like,
okay, but it's real this time.
Yeah, so it seems like every generation had that, but then it's like, well, wait a minute, politically, ecologically, like, it seems like maybe this time it really is.
We are rapidly approaching about 15 different breaking points of all these different, like, fundamental social structures. Like, it's unfathomable that things can continue in the same way that they have been for much longer. I mean, simply ecological collapse alone is going to radically alter the coming decades. We're going to be looking at an unfamiliar world. Very soon. Sooner than we think. I think that contained within that surety is certainly some terror, some existential dread. I feel it often. But there's also this, like, unprecedented opportunity that comes with the collapse of all that we know. The soon and certain collapse of all that we know. It affords us a window of opportunity to radically alter our society towards a more just and sustainable model, and we're gonna have to. I mean, we have to, or we'll die. I mean, the human race will go extinct. It's a scary and real prospect. I consider myself an optimist. I think that I have surrounded myself with people who do have hope for the future, and some of that has rubbed off on me, I hope.
Their hope for the future has rubbed off on you. I hope. Yeah. Just checking.
I'm on layers of hope. I'm playing 4D optimist chess here. It's
when Trump plays 3D chess, we play 4D hope.
Yeah. It's scary. Yeah, it's scary. Life is scary. I think we'll be all right. I think we'll be all right because we have to be all right. I think that I can't conceive of the future that Orwell talked about with the boot stamping on the human face forever. I can't conceive of that. I mean, we live in it now seemingly, but I can't conceive of it. It must reach a breaking point. It must.
Many folk punk bands have like hip hop style songs. This is a robbery. Jesse Stewart. Cheshky.
I think.
Cheshky? I've only seen it written, I think. Cheshky? Playtime Posse, and obviously like whatever Jesse Sadeas is like in typically, right?
Yeah. Skip and the Zoo kind of has some. Yeah.
So when are we going to get the Rent Strike?
Never.
John Worm? Never.
That's a weird suit for me to wear. I didn't grow up with hip hop. I didn't. I like. There's a lot of hip hop that I really like. The Coup is like one of my favorite acts, and there's hip hop certainly that I connect with, and I think it's also like right now probably the most interesting and the genre of music that has the most capacity for wide social change and influence inside of it. I think folk music is dead. Folk music had its time in the 60s. And I still do what I do because I love to sing and stuff, but I think that, the reality of it, we're moving towards a world that's going to be defined by the riot, and I think that the riot anthem is going to be one with a backbeat. It's not a suit that I feel super comfortable wearing.
For like appropriation reasons?
Sure, that's an element of it. But, you want to talk about cultural appropriation. I play the banjo. I mean, banjo is rooted in racism and it came to white audiences through some extremely vicious and malicious mocking of the newly freed slaves during Restoration or whatever. So that plays into it. I think that it would I don't know. Yeah, that's an element of it. I think another element of it is no, it's just not the kind of music that my mind tends toward writing, and perhaps that will change someday. I mean, maybe I said never pretty hastily, but it's not something that is on the radar.
Fair enough. I know, so for me, my upbringing was very rooted in Guns N' Roses and Metallica or whatever, right? So I thought rap, that's just bragging about cars and stuff.
Right.
That's all that is. I don't care about it. And then it wasn't until college when I first heard The Coup and Dead Prez and stuff. I'm oh, actually, this music has a crazy rich history of being super good. I just never heard about it. Mm-hmm. But I get what you're saying. Also, okay.
Plus, I love singing so much. I mean, I like singing.
So some tracks of yours I have in only fragments. Mm-hmm. It'll be it's a live show where they caught the end of a song or they caught the beginning of the next song. One of them goes, hoist your skirt above your knees, brush the needles from your hair, kiss me with those evil lips. It may be wrong, but I don't really care. So
it's not our song. I didn't write that.
Oh, you didn't write that?
No.
Oh.
It's a song called Hoist That Skirt by Those Poor Bastards.
Oh.
Yeah.
Well, fuck me. Still, my point isn't retracted. The point still stands. I assume a lot of bands have unreleased stuff.
Yeah.
Have you ever thought about kind of an unreleased album?
Yeah, well, we have this split that was supposed to come out a year ago. Never did. It's recorded. We have 4 songs that are like recorded and done, full band. But they're in mixing hell. Those will be out someday. Sorry.
I hate stuff like
I'm frustrated too.
Like I'll listen to, and lots of bands have this. I'll listen to like a live thing of whatever, Rent Strike, Mischief Brew, Pat the Bunny, and it's like, oh, they're about to play like some other song that I've never heard of.
Yeah.
And I'm like, no, it's gone. It's disappeared into the ether.
Yeah. Well, say la vie. Art is fleeting. You got to come to the live show if you want the whole experience, I guess.
Fair enough. Just a few more here, actually. Many bands struggle between making what their audience wants and making what they want. You know, like either you evolve and risk losing fans, or you're fucking playing the same 3 songs every show. Yep. Is there a direction you're wanting to take your music that you feel like maybe people aren't going to follow?
Yeah, well, no, I don't think people aren't going to follow it.
Or like something around that idea, right?
Sure.
Of that struggle between playing what the fans expect and doing with your music.
People really like, there's one song that was on the last record, I'll always be angry. It's 3 chords. I hate playing it. It's so boring. It's like 4 minutes of just literally B flat, E flat, B flat, F. It's so boring. And it's so not fun for me to sing, and it's just boring. But people like hearing it. Sometimes I play it live. Most of the time I don't. Especially playing solo. Like I played in Seattle a solo set a couple days ago. I only played 1 old song. The rest is new stuff. I guess I am, at the end of the day, up there and singing and making art for my own sake and my own self, and I'm really stoked on the new stuff that I've been writing, which is done with a little bit more musicality and intentionality than, for example, the song that you played in the intro is me just hacking away on a banjo, like 3 chords. You know, it is what it is, and it was what it was. But I'm starting to write stuff with like major 7th chords in it, which is unprecedented in my history. And I think that it is a line to walk, certainly, between like, I want to do this exploration and connect with music in a more than surface level way. Like, I think in the past, the reason and the driving force behind my making art was I had this idea in my head that just needed to get out of me, and I was going to, come hell or high water, get this message out of me. And I think through the production of 9 and how long it took, I think I kind of learned the importance of taking a step back and assessing how you're getting that point across, and how to do it sometimes without words.
There's definitely, like, going from the other one's like the self-titled album. So going from the self-titled album to 9 is like night and day in depth. Yeah. Like there's so much more like complexity. Yeah. To the songs in 9.
I'm hoping to make a similar jump between 9 and the next album, which is
like double the complexity. Like, what do you mean a similar jump?
Like that you could look at 9 and say, well, there are some good ideas here that are being developed, and then I'm hoping to bring some of them to fruition with the next record, or to further expand on some of. It's not that I'm trying to go in a radically different direction. It's that I'm trying to push the boundaries of the genre that I play. I think folk punk is it's almost a joke. I mean, like, folk punk is like really, it's a meme at this point. It's like, you know, it's the possum screaming at his own ass. Like, that's folk punk. And I think a lot of people have this, you know, I send out booking emails and I'm like, hey, I play in a folk punk band, and I I know that doesn't. People read the first sentence and they what's in the whole punk?
Like, okay, it was cool in the late Bush years when it was like new.
I mean, really, it's it's still I still go to shows and what's that? There's that picking sides that Wingnut Dishwasher sing. So for so if we're picking sides, I guess I am for every 3-chord high school punk band. If we're picking sides, I'm for all of the people who are still doing the same kind of folk punk that was popular, last decade, and obviously support it. And I think that the accessibility of the genre is one of its strengths. I think that it is wonderful that anyone can pick up a guitar and just
you
sing
scroll
what
through
they want.
r/folk punk and it's like
I wrote this song
person
about
with
how I
a
was strung out
ukulele, like
on the ukulele.
yeah, like filmed in their
Yeah,
bedroom,
totally,
like, hey
totally.
man, this is me.
And that's chill as fuck. And I think that that's one of folk punk's strengths. But I'm bored with it. I mean, from my own perspective, I'm bored with playing that music. I'm bored with. There's a whole world of harmony out there that you can do subtle things with music, and folk punk is not a genre that specializes in subtleties very frequently. I think that there are bands, certainly, this is, I'm painting with a broad brush here, obviously. I think that there are bands that do an incredible job of doing that within that genre. What I have been engaged with in terms of the writing that I've been doing is very... I'm just trying to see how far I can take this sound while still maintaining my sound and my ethos and certainly the messaging, but also I'm trying to write another Rent Strike record. It's not like I'm trying to write a Sufjan Stevens record or something. I'm trying to incorporate other ideas, but also, keep it to maybe not what the audience expects, but stuff that's fun for me to go and fucking say. The most fun I have playing music for people is going up and singing real loud, real hard about the problems that I perceive in the world, and that's just the attitude that I'm trying to keep alive with the next record.
What is DIY? For if you were gonna explain it to the uninitiated, what are the goals, the ethics, maybe its greatest achievements?
Well, its greatest achievements, they're almost hard to quantify because you think of great achievements as in the context of music so many times the greatest achievements are the records that sell really well and the records that bring a lot of money in. I think that the way that DIY is structured, at least in its purest form, is a space for art to flourish in a way that's not beholden to investors and in a way that is not done within the marketplace. And that's changing, I think. I mean, I've been in the DIY community for 10 plus years, and I guess I see, maybe it's kind of like what we were talking about earlier about how you start listening to Rosa and then it takes you to Days and Days, which takes you to Mumford and Sons. It's this bending towards the broad umbrella of capitalism. Maybe that's happened to the DIY scene. Maybe that's happening to the DIY scene. I see bands in there now that seemingly are maybe less so in folk punk, because I think folk punk is, as I said, more meme than genre, which I think is one of its strengths in terms of not allowing it to be infiltrated by capitalism. But I see, like there's this whole other kind of arm of the DIY scene, especially in the Midwest, is like Midwest emo, which has enjoyed a revival kind of in the past 5 or 6 years. And something that I've seen as a tendency in that scene is, I don't want to frame it too harshly. I think that there are certain bands and people who engage with this scene as a means to an end, where it's the end goal is to get signed to like a major record label, which isn't like a bad thing, I don't think. But to me, it misses the point of DIY, which is and always should be anti-capitalist, or at least have some sort of analysis of like, why are we doing this outside of the structures of the music industry? Like, what strength are we trying to build? What independent power outside of the pursuit of capital are we tending towards? I think that for that reason, amongst others, is like why I'm bummed out about like Spotify having this like having like this huge monopoly over how people consume art, where it's
rent their art.
Yeah, rent their art. I think it puts us in the pocket, and it makes us beholden to corporate interests, and puts more money in the pocket of Spotify's CEO and stuff, and it's I don't know. It's disheartening for sure. But at the same time, for all these shortcomings and all these admitted kind of misinterpretations of DIY, at the same time, like I just got off of 2 weeks with Chad Hates George, and we had like a band of like 5 or 6 people. Everyone was getting paid every night. Everyone was, we're not running a loss. Like, we're going around, we're playing living rooms and basements and weird DIY spaces, and it's like these people are setting up these shows out of the goodness of their hearts, and like a lot of time, sometimes people have nefarious ulterior motives in terms of the amassment of social capital, which then they use to assault people, which happens with shocking frequency. But 90% of the people I've met in the DIY scene are like seriously the most wholesome and wonderful and giving and hospitable people around. And I think that so much of DIY is done with no expectation. And that's the kind of world that I want to live in, where people are kind to each other with no expectation. That's the beauty of DIY.
Awesome. I love it. All right, folks, we have just a few questions left, but we are going to take a brief intermission, and then we will join you in just a few moments.
Unsatisfied, incomplete, on solid ground, I'm on my feet. The street lights call out to me, and they say nothing will ever feel that good. And in my dreams, it's in my hand, but it keeps slipping through the cracks like grains of sand. Now watch it fall out of reach, and I know nothing will ever feel that good. So when
Alrighty. Folks, we are back. Just a few more questions. I have seen a cultural kind of divide in the punk scene, whether it's like at shows or the types of things that get posted to like whatever Facebook punk group that exists out there.
Sure.
That this divide between what I guess you could call like the fuck you punk of Anti Nowhere League, the Mentors, Gigi Allen, all that kind of stuff, and the sort of like SJWPC, like not about that type of punk band like Ludlow, War on Women,
Yeah.
Limp Wrist, or whatever. Does this divide exist? Like, is it a real thing? Where does it come from? And should or could we try and like solve that rift?
Well, I want. Let's see. Where to start?
Solve all of punk culture.
Oh, sure. We just need scene unity. If we all just listen to more Operation Ivy. The divide is real. I mean, it's hard to go. I think maybe the internet, the echo chamber of the internet, seems to make it seem a lot more stark than it is. In my experience, it's usually, or at least in like the Facebook groups I've been in, someone comes on, they say something stupid like, I don't know, assaulting people is good, or like some stupid shit, like seriously, some like dumb, reprehensible, indefensible shit. And then the community jumps on them, and you know they get to laugh like they were trolling or whatever. And I think that there's a wider consensus about what behavior is acceptable and what ethics we should be striving towards. There's more of a consensus than I think the Facebook groups let on. But the divide is real. I think that there's some people with like some really, not to use an overused word, problematic views about what punk rock means. I think a lot of people are stuck in this mentality of like, punk is fuck you to everything and everyone, which I think misses the point in a very big way. And I think, like, you know, a person like Gigi Allen, I think served his purpose in punk. I think he went to a length and to a place that now no one ever needs to do that again. We've seen the darkness. We've seen the depths and depravity that that dude went to, and we don't need to do that anymore. We can all start being nice to each other. Like you know, this was the '80s. Like this is and '90s. Like this is like
it was like a response to like the religious right
sure
growing or something.
Sure. And that was, I mean, back in the '80s and '90s, you know, and you know Thatcher and Reagan, you know, like that was the big threat towards our autonomy and our individuality was this kind of pearl clutching, like, oh my God, you know, everything needs to be like, you know, okay with Jesus or whatever. And I think that like that strain of punk rock was born out of opposition to that. But now what we're looking at is like these power structures that are, in ways that they weren't before, explicitly racist, explicitly sexist, explicitly, you know, all these other things. And I think people are stuck in this mentality of like, they see a large group of people empowered to speak for change and somehow get it twisted up with this idea of like the establishment and the mainstream and view it as a threat or something, and just need to assert their individuality as being in opposition to that, which I think is extremely childish and stupid. And I think I don't know, in terms of what we can do to solve it, I think that people who I see on the internet who come out swinging against those perspectives and come out swinging against people who are flippantly homophobic and transphobic. It's hard for me to be like, well, we should be nicer, because like, fuck that. Like, I mean, we've been marginalized folks have been putting up with this shit forever, and like, it's just like it's shocking to me some of the bad fucking takes that are out there where it's like grow up. Like, I don't know, like look at the world we live in. Like, why are you wasting your time like being this source of, you think you're being so anti-establishment, but you're like just upholding the status quo, and like that's so.
Haven't you heard conservatism is the new punk?
People think that it's ridiculous.
What I think, like what you're saying is making me think of this, is that Charlottesville, I think for a lot of like the skeptic, like online, like enlightened centrist skeptic people,
sure,
Charlottesville was like, hey, wait a minute, there's like a bunch of Nazis like in my fan club, and I think maybe like in a way, punk maybe had like a similar breakthrough of like, yeah, we had like a fuck you lash out moment, but we're not about to have like a bunch of bigots and like reactionaries in our club, so to speak. Does that track? Does that make sense?
When do you view this moment as having happened, or has it happened? Perhaps it is an ongoing moment.
Yeah. So like for online stuff, it was like, I feel like Charlottesville was like a wake up call for like a lot of the anti SJW like online stuff. I feel like that, but I don't think punk had a moment per se. I don't know that bands that are like that are as popular. I don't know. There's a lot of like psychobilly stuff, and like I don't have any kind of question about this, but I've noticed a lot of psychobilly, rockabilly stuff is very like 50s idyllic.
I can't fucking stand that shit. Seriously, the town that I used to live in, a lot of it is like, maybe less so now. Now that Midwest emo has become a thing, but the music scene in my little Rust Belt hometown was very much marked through my teenage years by, like, you know, that psychobilly kind of rockabilly, like, what do they call it?
Horror punk?
Well, adjacent, yeah, but there's like a name for it. Alt country or something, maybe.
Oh, okay. I mean,
but it's
I like the sound of like a clicky stand-up bass.
Same, and you know, I think there's some really great songs.
I just don't care for like stroking off the 50s as like this really magical moment in American history.
God, and you go to these shows and it's like literally all white people, 100% white people, and it's like I don't think that there's like, I'm not gonna, I don't know. It's like, look around you. So, you know, just be always be critical of what you're engaging with, and the messaging, whether inherent or whether explicit. I just think that we could all do with a little bit more intention in what we do.
Someone in the comments said that Derek Anderson in the comments said the Misfits lead singer Danzig was right wing. I didn't know about Danzig, but I know that one other guy was like a Bush. Yeah, totally. Graves was like a Bush supporter.
Didn't he like go on the Daily Show or something and was talking about how like
I'm a Bush supporting punk?
Yeah.
Oh man, God, cringe.
That's so unsurprising. But also, you can't look to any famous musician, whether or not they're playing punk rock, to be a paragon of like political thought. They're fucking rich. Like, rich people literally have the worst political take. That's how they end up rich. Like that. I don't know. It's hard for me to be like, people get wrapped up in a lot of, you know, like, I don't want to say like idol worship. I don't think it's that deep, but I think it's like people expect these people who like have these songs that they connect with to also have. They expect perfection from them, and then are surprised and disappointed when that expectation isn't reached. And like, well, of course it's not going to be reached. These are not only, you know, human beings are obviously flawed, but like these are fucking rich people. Like, what do you expect from Danzig? Like, fuck Danzig.
Yeah, I forget the exact quote, but Jello Biafra said like, "Oh, your heroes, they all suck anyway." Like once you find out about your, heroes, like
Totally.
I don't know, whoever.
I think. Well, not to reopen old wounds, but I think folk punk certainly had a moment of reckoning with that with a certain band that I don't want to really go into, but it was a very influential band that it
Some
kind of
stuff came out about.
they were not. I mean, very influential in that they kind of codified and propped up much of the genre as it was developing, and it comes out that the singer is just a terrible person, and I think that it broke a lot of people's hearts and their trust, and I think that's shitty. Obviously, what he did was terrible and unconscionable, but it's almost like a moment of reckoning that it would be unhealthy to never have that moment of reckoning. I suppose not to paint too bright a picture. Look for silver lining in a pretty awful situation. But
So this I actually only have like 2 more questions, but what you're saying is like sparking another question.
Sure.
If you'll take it.
Sure.
So I've been thinking about this like a lot because there's a lot of talk about like online cancel culture and stuff or whatever. Like, is it toxic? Is it good? Are people allowed to make mistakes?
Sure.
And last time we spoke, I talked about how a few shows that I played, bands that had also played at those shows either had previously been shitty and I didn't know about it, or like were shitty afterwards, right? To what extent, like, how do people do like redemption from that? Is it possible? Like, to what extent?
of course, it's possible. I think that.
Like, what would that even look like? Because I think sometimes I'm sorry, like not to like not let you answer, but
No,
I think that sometimes the left can look like a beehive to people.
Okay.
That like there's a lot of infighting and like a lot of purity testing or something that like people think like, oh man, like I made racist joke, like I had a cringy phase in high school, like will I be or whatever. But then at the same time, like, well, we don't want shitty people around because we want to have a place that's like inviting.
Right.
And so, how do we fucking square that circle? Like, not have shitty people, but not make it look like we're always infighting, but allow for some reconciliation and forgiveness for people who have been shitty and want to like make amends.
Sure. Well, I guess I will say I think I agree with the assessment that the left can sometimes be a clusterfuck of infighting. I would argue that I would rather have the infighting and the ever vigilant kind of attitude that the left has. I think that that's one of the strengths of the left, to be honest. I think that like being able to critique ourselves is hugely important. I do think some of that gets lost in kind of like at least the caricature of cancel culture that sometimes gets drawn, which is a caricature for a reason. And I think that sometimes there are cases in which I have seen shit handled really poorly. I will say, in those cases, I think that people who were acting, I try to give people the benefit of the doubt in terms of maybe you're not going about demanding accountability in the perfect way, but also like understanding that like we're still figuring out what that looks like, and like of course people are pissed when people hurt other people. Like that's natural, and like I don't want to characterize it as like sometimes cancel culture is revenge seeking, because I think that it's a bit more nuanced than that. But I guess there's like an element of like I understand that inclination. I think that there are some models of accountability that are being worked out in real time that are inspiring and kind of offer us a window into what restorative justice might look like. I don't think that the same intention and care are used every time that an accountability process happens, especially within the music scene.
Can you even? I'm trying to think of like an example where someone has gone through like a redemptive process, like
Like
is
like a musician, or
yeah, like
I have an example.
yeah, please, like you know,
So
if that's
so this is and it's not. I guess I'm not gonna. I want to preface this with like I don't know what the moral takeaway from the situation is. I think that it was a complicated situation that was unfortunate. I don't think that there was a good way to handle it.
but it's easier to look at examples than to just say like
Yeah, sure.
there's probably some way to be redeemed.
So there's a musician. I can't even remember his name, and honestly, whatever. There's a musician from Chicago who was booked on a fest that I ended up playing in Michigan. He was one of the headliners, and in the lead up to the fest, it came out that he was an activist with this group in Chicago and assaulted someone, and it was made public. And he went through an accountability process that was victim-led and conducted within this group that, like I was saying, like is really kind of writing the rule. You know, it's a black-led movement that a lot of this restorative justice work, because communities of color are so shafted by the judicial system, that's where a lot of the interesting and important work of is getting done, of exploring justice outside of the judicial system. So he goes through this accountability process, and the victim survivor, has come forward and said, you know, like this person did this accountability process right. I think it's good that he continues to perform and use this platform to spread the message of, hey, here's how toxic masculinity totally warped my perception of what was right and wrong, and basically perpetuated this mindset that I had that caused that I assaulted someone because I was thinking this certain way. You know, like using his experience as a perpetrator to speak to other people and address their toxic masculinity in this crowd from this platform, which is like I view as a really constructive thing. And it's like hard for me to listen to the person, like the survivor here, and you know, the team of people who work with them through this accountability process. It's hard for me to listen to what they're saying about, like, I think this guy should continue to have a platform and use it for this end, and discount that. But he got booked on this fest. This, you know, came to light. It was open public knowledge that this happened, and a bunch of people wrote in to the organizer of this fest being like, you should kick him off. And they ended up, what happened? They said that they were going to keep him on, which caused an online shitstorm. And then they ended up throwing him off the bill. Or maybe that sounds a little bit too much like I'm like, oh, poor guy, he got thrown off the bill. They took him off the bill.
I feel like that's kind of hard because like part.
Well, I don't know what the moral takeaway is here.
Yeah,
right?
it's like I want people to be able to come forward, right? Like okay, what if, you know, so and so band, like let's not have it be anyone in this room. So and so band is a bad person that hasn't been caught. And like, oh, are they never coming forward because they know it's going to be a shitstorm when they do, or will it be a safe place for them to be like, hey, I was shitty. Like, I'm not even going to wait for like it to come out. Like, I'm doing this, this, and this.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's like I don't know what the right answer is.
It's also hard in music because I think that like accountability, in my mind, there's so much of it is dependent on an accountability to not only people who you've negatively affected with your actions, but to yourself. And like I think that like I look at my past and I'm not gonna blame it on drugs, but when I was involved in using drugs, I did some terrible things, and I really like hurt people, and I stole and lied and hurt people pretty badly. But it's hard for me to conceptualize accountability in the sphere of public life, or like in the sphere of like outside of the personal, because I think that so much of that growth necessary to like really fulfill the intent of an accountability process is done on a personal level. And I don't know whether that means to interpret like if you want to have a public life like a musician does or like a performer does, you can have never done anything bad before. I think that's another thing where people set up their expectations for the people who... Well, it's like Glenn Danzig being a piece of shit Republican. It's like, people have an inclination to set themselves up for disappointment when they realize that the artists that they've connected with are human and are flawed. And I guess I don't know how to... Perhaps the answer is to make room for the human in the people we look up to, or something. There's a line to be drawn though, right? Though, because like, there's people who like you did this, get the fuck out of my scene. Like, I don't want you here. Like that's dangerous. And I don't know. Those are hard questions. Those are hard questions, and I think in the context to tie it back with this example that I was giving, I think in the context of it, I personally, and maybe this is irrelevant, personally, I was pretty disappointed that the organizers decided to not have this person perform. All things considered, I think that it was kind of a big erasure of the work by this group to pursue an accountability process, and a missed opportunity to have a admittedly difficult but important conversation about how that can look. But if we're not there as a society and as a music scene, if we're not having those conversations yet, I also have room for being kind of in this time period where like people in positions of power and performers have gotten away with so much for so long.
Mm-hmm.
It's hard for me to not empathize and sympathize with people who are like, no, fuck that, you fucked up, get the fuck out of the scene. It's I understand that, and I get that, and I hope that soon we're able to find a model, maybe, or be able to have hard conversations about accountability and about the responsibility of public figures and the responsibility of us as community members towards each other. That doesn't look like canceling every time. But it's hard.
Yeah, I feel like there's a divide between what you could call our two art forms. That like, if someone, there's a lot more in real life connection where if someone from one band was like, hey, by the way, so and so in this other band is a problem and we refuse to work with them, just letting you know. Where like maybe in an online space it's kind of more difficult, but there's so much gray area between like so and so used the R slur in a tweet when they were in high school, and like, oh, by the way, so and so is literally like a predator that like has used their musical influence to like to groom audience members, right?
Yeah.
Like, and how do you? Where's the?
Well, I think an important question to ask from the onset is like, what are the goals? Like, I mean, if you're going to, if someone needs to be called out or whatever, what are the goals? I mean, if a person used a problematic word in a tweet, for example, perhaps a public apology would be necessary in moving forward. If someone is using their platform to groom people, they shouldn't have that platform. I mean, I think we're striving towards solutions that can be applied to cases across the board, and there is no easy solution like that. I think it ultimately boils down to like holding each other accountable and holding ourselves accountable is a lot more work than a lot of us are prepared to do. Maybe.
Yeah.
But I think we as a community can rise to the occasion. I mean, I think these solutions must be found. Otherwise, it is going to, it does frequently. I see it, and I've seen it happen where someone does something really, really awful, and it literally tears an entire community apart. Which is, I mean, it's heartbreaking. You know, it plays out so many times if people pick sides and there's no clear answer about like who's in what even the truth is and who's in the right and who's in the wrong. And I don't know. It's hard.
What are some things that you have going on musically right now? Things to plug. This is the plugging stuff section of our discussion. Sure. Stuff new that's coming up. Tour wise, new music, CD coming out wise.
I'm going on a solo tour in February in the South. We're probably announcing it like shortly after New Year's.
Folks in the South. Tour.
Southeast. We'll have a split coming out soon, I hope. If it ever gets done getting mixed.
Okay. Just one last thing before we get to audience questions, because audience questions are coming up, but one last thing before that. What are some songs that you know how to play that people wouldn't expect you to know?
Am I going to have to play them? Oh, gosh, don't put me on the spot like that. I knew... I'm not even going to remember it, too. I learned Oops, I Did It Again on the banjo.
Oh!
My partner now, I learned it... This was back when I was crushing on them really hard. I learned it and played that for them at this birthday party that they had. And now we're partners and have been dating for about 2 years. So it works if you have a crush on someone. You know, just learn Britney Spears on the banjo and it'll work out.
Well, I don't own a banjo. I just have a guitar. But a cover song people might not expect. Maybe, huh? No. What about what? Okay, all right. If not that, although I would love it, but if not that, is there the stuff that's in the works? Is it in the works enough that there's something to play from?
I could play a song, sure.
Okay.
Let's see if I have I don't know if I have a pick. Do you have a pick?
Oh shit! I meant to grab one. There used to be one over here. I know where one is. That was one of the things I meant to grab.
Nice little salsa jar. Oh wow! You don't have anything between a 38 and a 1.5.
Maybe. I stopped playing with picks when I noticed I could not for the life of me keep a hold of them.
Yeah, you gotta get the grippy one.
Hopefully one of those will
Okay, this'll be fine. Got here, wow. This isn't grippy, but it is extremely sticky.
Hopefully that's alright.
Okay, this is fine. Yeah, this is a new one. This is a new one.
Called?
It's called The Threshold. Which it's the first song. So this is the first song I wrote that I started writing and finished writing after I moved to Pittsburgh in the fall. I was there. I had this incident happen where I had an onion in my hand and I was trying to cut it with this serrated knife and like sliced my finger open really bad. So I couldn't play guitar for a while, and wrote the song on the piano and then moved it to the guitar. So it kind of it was something new and different for me. But yeah, we'll see how this turns.
I have like a regular acoustic too if it's more comfortable. But the strings are older on it.
Keep on grabbing it.
I'll grab it just a check. I picked that one because I know it's got newer strings. But you can maybe check and see if that one's more.
Okay. I think I want to put this one.
Okay. Well, that one I did not tune beforehand. Welcome to How to Tune the Guitar 101.
Basically, you want to wildly twist these knobs.
I have a tuner as well.
That might be helpful.
Trying to keep it really professional here. You see.
Wow, old school tuner.
will be doing audience questions, so just do @Radical Reviewer in the comments so I can see which ones are audience questions. After we do a song, or maybe two if we're so lucky, and then we'll do some audience questions before we call it a day.
Okay.
All right, we're good?
Yeah.
Okay.
Blade will bite. It was made to do like a dog is born to chew. And bones, they were made to break, and feelings made to fight. I know the score, but I can't explain why I keep denying the inevitable that's contained within the form. Everything, everybody, everything. And so it goes. We were doomed from the start. These systems can grow no more, start falling apart. The damage is irreparably done. We wanted too much, and we flew too close to the sun. Now I can see the portions of my paycheck inside the prisons and the banks and the genocides of this alien race. I pray that nothing's gonna take its place. Now I have learned to read between the lines, and I have seen beyond the limits minutes of our time, and ooh, it should come as no surprise. We're at the threshold of something big. At the threshold of something big. At the threshold.
Awesome.
Nice.
Thank you. Fuck yeah. We did have one question. If you want to answer this one, is Bandcamp better or worse or the same as Spotify from an artist perspective?
Well,
If y'all already talked about Bandcamp, feel free to. Oh yeah.
I look at Bandcamp as a bit more kind of like democratic or direct of a platform whereas with Spotify you can't, like, if you wanted to buy an album, the way you do that now is through Bandcamp. You can't the way you buy an album, you would have to stream an album like something like 600 times or something to like get it up to a point where you're paying an artist for the worth of an album. I guess that is to say I make more money off of Bandcamp, but they also don't pay you for passive streaming. So they each have their pros and cons. Yeah.
All right. Someone asked, this was like a question for me, I guess, but ever think of reviewing a music album in the future? I've done a few videos that are like song lists, and I'd probably keep it to that. I've even thought about doing like a genre. I don't know. I did a video that was my favorite anti-cop songs, my favorite anti-military songs. I think that's a little bit more in my wheelhouse than trying to address an album with the very brick and mortar way I tend to review things. If you look at my movie reviews, it's a lot more just like story analysis than like an artistic view of it, the way that maybe someone like Folding Ideas or Lindsay Ellis would do. Got something else for us? Huh?
Sure. You don't have a capo, do you?
I do have a capo. A capo was on this guitar, but now I don't see it. I got all the shit. I got washboard. I got a harmonica neck thing. If you need that.
Oh yeah, well the next album is actually solo washboard only.
Hey, I didn't put it in the question about hip hop, but I liked those Blackbird Rom just washboard and singing songs that they did on their album. I thought that was good. Before you get started, thoughts on how the French general strike is totally unreported, as other global activities are underreported worldwide. Where do we go with that?
1 million people in the streets of Paris. That is wild. And it's not reported at all. I mean, the New York Times did like one story that had no mention of the numbers. Where do we go? I mean, I think we're going to see the increasing democratization of news reporting. I think Twitter goes a long way towards people being able to have access to news that mainstream media is not reporting.
You know what it reminds me of? You remember that System of a Down music video that was showing the anti-Iraq war protests?
No.
It was like, I forget what System of a Down song it was, but one of them, and they're filming the anti-Iraq war protest and giving the numbers on the bottom, and like that was pulled from MTV like right away or whatever. But the anti-Iraq war protests were like the biggest protests in the world, and they got like no news coverage.
Yeah, I mean, I think protests like that, anything that showcases the strength of people coming together, and shakes kind of the shakes the bows, so to speak, I think is always going to be underreported. I think that there's a lot of people who are doing some really brave things by being there on the ground and reporting things in a really cohesive and the spirit of journalism, I think, has moved on, for better or worse, from traditional media outlets to a more
Yeah, I mean, I get like all my, I find out about stuff from like Twitter first,
always,
and then from like YouTube next.
And it's always like you can't trust the tape. Like, I mean, I think about like maybe the microcosm of like the what people are calling a coup in Bolivia recently, or these situations like in Venezuela where it's like I, as a person living in like who do I trust? Like, what narrative do I trust? Like I don't know. Like everyone's approaching it with their own bias, and it's like so hard to get like unfettered information. Maybe that's the wrong word. Unfiltered information. You know, it's always filtered through someone else's perspective, and I think it's only through consuming a wide array of different perspectives within reason do we arrive at something close to the truth.
Yeah. Yes. True.
Should I play this song?
Yeah, play us a song.
Okay. I'm going to play one more. This one's more fun and upbeat. Life is work. That's what they say. I scribbled all over the back of the proof of my pay. I was singing it's work. Oh, and that's work till you die. Go and make that dollar for somebody else. Maybe they'll hand you a dime. Oh, it's an endless degradation. It's 100,000 little lacerations, the payoff of which couldn't fit on any check that anyone could conceivably cut. Oh, and you bleed, and you bleed, and you bleed, and the earth just laps it up. Oh, work, you're why I still smoke. And I gotta drink beer at the end of the day, 'cause I gotta cope with all of the work that I suffer through. What they say is the truth, and that I should be thankful to do. Oh, but they will mock us and they will mistreat us till they can replace us all with an after kiosk. And apathy is the natural byproduct of being exhausted and sick all the time. So don't tell me that working like this is the meaning of life. So yeah, I work, but I try not to be defined by what I am paid for an hour of my time. 'Cause it's just a means to an ending, and all of the energy that I end up expending, I will get it back in spades when the systems that necessitate all of this work fall apart, and we ourselves for change. So we gotta work, cause none of our visions of a better tomorrow are ever gonna come to fruition without a whole lot of work. Oh, and that's all there is to it. So, god damn it, I guess that we gotta do it. Oh, but that looks like so many things, and these economics, they could never conceive all of our value or measure our worth. No, I will not let them tell me what it means to do work. Yeah. That's my song about how much I hate my job.
You played that at the. Did you play it? You played it at the last show I saw because I remember it distinctly.
It's been in the electric band rotation for a little bit. The first one that I played is like brand new, but it's been in the electric rotation. It's probably going on the next record.
I remember dancing my ass off to that one. All right, so some questions. Does the Rust Belt? Oh, this is from Derek Anderson. Does the Rust Belt create its own style of punk music? Would you say unique to locale?
Yes, I'm sure that it does. I think a lot of the interesting punk that has existed, it comes from a place of disenfranchisement. I think that's the punk spirit lives kind of in the shadows of what is it lives in the shadows of society and the forgotten elements of it. And I think the Rust Belt certainly ticks a lot of those boxes. And now kind of as we're seeing this redevelopment happen, not that it's unique to the Rust Belt, but developers coming in and buying up large swaths of land and buildings at very, very cheap prices and then developing them into, say apartments and condos and stuff, big box stores. We're seeing kind of a unique sort of different kind of disenfranchisement. I think there's some interesting art being made kind of in response to that. But I also think that in the things that distinguish the Rust Belt from the rest of the country, in my perspective, those distinctions are maybe getting a little harder to draw because everywhere. I mean, here I am in Cascadia, and it's impossible to look around at the landscape and not see how it's been radically altered by moneyed interests. And people are getting priced out of their homes and having their lives uprooted by this influx of development capital everywhere. And I think that there's some good art that's being made in response. I look at like Jeff Rosenstock does a ton of poignant songs about gentrification, about just the changing American landscape as we crash ever forward on the path of progress and development. I think that there's interesting art to be found in the shadow of it everywhere.
Yeah. Yes. I'm thinking about like two separate things. Like part of me is thinking about like, there's like 90s hip hop had like the East Coast West Coast thing where like because of the internet, like the location of music is very decentralized.
Sure.
But like the inspiration for the creation of the music is still kind of localized, right? Like you're writing what's inspirational to you. So I'm thinking about that, and then I'm thinking about a Chris Hedges book, which title I'm forgetting. So I'm going to leave that where that. I'm going to drop off the sentence there. Okay. Another question is, what would be the ideal way for society to support and provide for musicians/artists? By D-Dubs asks that question.
Well, as long as we're talking about ideals, I mean, I think like I would love to live in a world where no one had to work a terrible wage gig to survive, and I think that if people were freed from that bondage, I think that we would see an unprecedented blooming and flourishing of art. I think art is often regarded as totally superfluous in our society because unless you're very successful, it doesn't make you any money.
Like a guy playing guitar on the weekend for fun. It's like, you're not making any money.
Right. And so there's a certain kind of like negation of the act itself because it's not profitable. And I think that like if we hopefully strive for a society where we're not ruled by the laws of productivity and capital, I think that like a rediscovery of art, the artist in all of us, and kind of the need to make art, like the need to eat and to sleep, is society supporting its artists is society supporting itself. I mean, I think that I would love to see a world where there wasn't a stark divide between the artist and the consumer, where it's a recognition that kind of like all of our fates and well-beings are tied in with one another, and that our to support art is to support ourselves, I guess.
Yeah, I feel like back to like one of the early questions, the CGP Grey thing about like, art is automatically like a audience-based medium, and so like there will always be less artists than there is general public.
Yeah, I was gonna push back on that.
Yeah,
I don't
like
agree with that.
sometimes like I've been to shows where a lot of the people watching the show have their own bands,
Yeah.
which is.
Or it's just kind of like the demystification of the artistic process. I think it's a lot of people think that, and maybe this is another strength of folk punk, where it's like I think that a lot of folk punk is based around the demystification of the artist and like this idea that anyone can do it and everyone should do it. That's important.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a great note to end on.
I agree.
You had a.
I got nothing.
So let's. All right. Goodbye, everyone. This was John Worm from Rent Strike coming to visit us and talk with us about DIY and folk punk and politics and everything, and we hope that you enjoyed it. Look forward to that Rent Strike split that's coming out. If you live in the Southeast, there's a Rent Strike tour coming your way. John is also connected with a bunch of other bands you probably like. Plays with Chatterbox and the Latter-day Satanists as well. Plays with Chad Hates George and Days and Days on occasion. On occasion.
Once specifically. But Chad Hates George more regularly.
All right. So, yeah, I hope that you all enjoyed. We will see you folks next time. Bye.
Thanks.